I'm so excited to be here today and to have my partner in DEI and data, Landi Spearman, joining me today. So what I was saying is welcome to everyone who is joining us both on LinkedIn in our LinkedIn event, but also for the people who are on Zoom. So if you could in chat, please just put where you are joining us from, or maybe something about you, like what do you do in the world? I think for those of you who register through Zoom, we have a little bit of information about, what company you work for, but I just love to know who's here. Also on the screen, you can see that a few people have started answering our poll question that's up on the screen. And so in order to join the poll, because we will have other questions as well, make sure that you go to pollev.com/jjohnson128, or you can text jjohnson128 to 22333. So I want to make sure we dive in and get started because Landi and I have so much to share today, and we only have a limited amount of time. And so I'm looking at my other screen. I see that we have several people who are already joining us on Zoom. I see some messages in chat. So also just to mention, our assistant, Exo Claveria, is and it says CTM Unlimited. He is the one who's kind of managing the chat. So if you have any challenges with the poll, or if you have any other technical challenges, please make sure to reach out to him. So with that said, Landi, are you ready?
Am I?
Yes. Let's go.
Absolutely, positively. Now, Janae, I cannot see myself. I'm making sure you can see me.
Oh, I can see you.
Okay, fantastic.
Yeah, red lip. I can see you.
Okay, fair enough. We're ready then.
Perfect. All right, let's go. So if for those of you who did not get a chance to respond to the poll question, you will have other opportunities to respond, but I want to make sure that we dive into the content. So Landi and I will do some brief individual introductions, but collectively, the reason why we came together on this is because we are very much aligned on the following things that you see on the screen. So this is collectively who we are. Even though we run separate businesses, we do partner to work with clients. And really, we have similar missions, which is why this was such a good fit for us. So we're all about helping leaders tackle equity challenges in the workplace. We are DEI disruptors, so we're not going to be your traditional diversity and inclusion consultants. We are approaching it from a very different perspective, and we really are results driven. Like that's the reason why we're here. We want to make sure that you are getting results, and that this is a bigger mission. This is about disrupting systemic inequities. This is not just about doing the work to be doing it. We are also very much into developing leaders and developing people from a place of inclusion. And Landi and I are both tech, innovation, tools, toys, all of that. Like that's what we do. So Landi, did I capture that right? Is that accurate? Am I saying
you know
right?
What? Yes, what I would add, Janae, is the reality of who we are. So when you think about, I have this beautiful masterpiece is what I'll call it behind me. And what it represents change. It represents diversity. It represents the face of innovation. And so your question was, did I capture it? Absolutely, positively, because we bring a level of adaptability, a level of influence because of what we've been through, because of the change that we've had to figure out. Would you agree, Janae?
I would definitely agree. And listen, the chat is kind of lighting up. I'm not even sure what's going on, Landi, because I can't even see the chat. I just keep seeing flashes. So obviously we're saying something that's resonating. If you are on LinkedIn, we would love to hear from you on chat because we can't see your comments yet, but Exo is actually pulling in some comments from LinkedIn Live. So wherever you are joining us, we just want you to dig in and engage. So quickly, we're going to introduce ourselves individually. So Landi, go ahead and tell the world about, they've heard from me already, and I'll talk about what we do, but
Sure.
Tell the world about Organized Shift and tell them about the work that you've been doing.
Oh my gosh. So you mentioned not being able to see the chat. I've been all up in the chat. That's why I was like, wait a minute, let me pay attention. Because I am here local in Houston, but the reach that we have is very global. Organized Shift is, if you think about what we're all facing right now, it's change, right? And so how do you figure out how to change and how to adapt? I changed the business model that we had back when Hurricane Harvey hit us. Janae, remember that in 2017?
I do. Yeah.
So it hit us hard. And as leaders, we were trying to get back to work, get back to normal. And if you can think about that, that's kind of what we're trying to do with COVID right now. So we changed that business model from moving boxes to moving mindsets. And that's what we do. We utilize data, we utilize diversity, we create innovation as a part of an inclusive environment. We do that for teams, for leaders, corporations, startups, and in conjunction with partners like you. Now, one thing that Janae did not say was that she is in her third trimester. So when I was thinking about who would be the best person, I was a part of the Houston Tech Rodeo last year, very, very successful engagement and showcase of Houston Tech and innovation, something that is a different industry for us. And I thought about this year, who would be the best person to partner with to engage in the conversation about diversity, about equity, about inclusion. So when you think about CTM Unlimited, if I can just say so myself, Janae has been very active, not just in LinkedIn, but you may have seen her, you know, in the Chronicle or in a newspaper or two, or even just most recently on television, speaking about what some of the things that it takes to be bold, brave, to infuse change into your environment, into your culture. And so I'm super excited to be here with you, Janae. I just really wanted to say that. Thank you for joining me, and thank you all for joining us. Please continue to put where you're from in the chat, and we will definitely have time for questions as well. We got a lot to cover, Janae. You said it.
I love it. So I don't think I need to add too much more, except for at the very end of this, if you're interested in learning more about what we do, and our individual companies and capabilities, then you can go to the website. The links will be in chat at the very end of this session. For those of you who are already joining us on LinkedIn, you're connected to one of us, so it's easy to find us. If you are not connected to us on LinkedIn and you're joining us on Zoom, then at the very end of this presentation, we'll have all the information on how to reach us and how to connect. So I want to move on from there because listen, Landi, you already did the intro. Yes, I have a lot going on in life. But you saw my Fox 26 News segment a couple weeks ago. I have a gang of kids. I'm also pregnant and running this business and loving every moment of it. And so let's go ahead and dig in because again, we got a lot today. Yes. So I'm seeing the people in chat. Welcome to everyone who's there. I see Melanie. I see Emma. I see, looks like
Bryant. Yep. We're there in the house.
Claire.
All over
someone is joining us from Germany. Hello?
Yeah. And
hi, Germany. I love it.
And France.
Okay. Let's go global. I like it. All right. So today we're really going to boil this down to three things. We're going to really talk about why we're here in the first place, because this topic is not just about the things that we want to talk about. But Landi, why else are we here? And tell us a little bit more about what people can expect in the session.
Sure. So, and I'm checking my notes here, but let me just speak to you. Let me just say that where we are today, we're facing so many different complexities where the amount of change that we're currently facing, it can sometimes be overwhelming and unbearable, but yet we get up and we keep showing up, right? And so why we're here is because there is this element of systemic change. There is this element of racial inequality that we've been talking about, we've been hearing about, but the reality is, how do we solve the problem? How do we start to take a bite of that? And so there's this thing called data. You all may have heard of it if everybody has their phone, right? Where there's data constantly being tracked. And so when we think about ourselves as innovators, as entrepreneurs, as executives, as CTOs, COOs of corporations, where are you in your journey, right? So there is this dilemma with data and DEI, but then there's also different approaches to tackle it. And so what we are going to talk about today is why we're here, even have some room for some definitions and conversations about, equity versus equality and disparities in calculations and numbers and how you really have to dive into the data. So Janae, that kind of sums it up, would you say, as to why we're here?
Yeah, I think so. And just for context, Landi has a lot of experience and background in data visualization and being a data scientist, right? And like having the credentials around that. And so this was, for me, this was a natural partnership because in our business, we were already looking at, okay, we have to be focused around data. And, as a part of our team, we have a business intelligence architect who builds out these dashboards for our clients and to make sure that there is sustainability and accountability. And so I'm just excited for us to partner in this, Landi, because I think, we have the same mindset about why this is important, why data is important, and how we use it to drive sustainable change. So with that said, let's go ahead and dive in. So why are we here? We're going to talk about a few reasons why we're here. And in this segment, we're really going to acknowledge some of the things that maybe have not been said, right? So we know last year there were a lot of very public statements from a lot of different corporations all around the globe talking about why it was so important to do something about racial inequity, specifically after George Floyd was killed in late May of last year. So we're about a year after. This is about a year later. And so what's happening is what we're seeing is that companies, big and small, right, are all starting to think about, okay, well, what is this social responsibility piece and how do we fit in? And more importantly, how do we make this real? So we made these commitments, whether it was a CEO statement or we put out a DEI plan or we committed to gather data, because I've seen a lot of companies that said, this is our first time publishing a diversity report. We never have done this, but we want to be transparent, which I applaud them. But I think that there are a lot of challenges in that. And one of the reasons why we are here is to acknowledge this truth.
Yeah.
What's the truth?
When I don't know if you saw me take a breath, right? So,
right.
Even when I'm coaching executives on how do you tackle this thing, the reality is sometimes we just have to pull back and breathe, right? Because the work that we're trying to do is hard. The reason why the work is so difficult is because it is so complex, because it involves people,
right?
like just people, right? So the thing that I love about being in tech is I can create something. I can, be a part of a team or a group or a hackathon or create a new app, and it can solve a problem. It's a thing, it's a tangible, it's a piece of software, a piece of hardware, and it could fix a problem. But with people problems, things like culture, things like diversity, things like valuing our differences, the work is harder, because it's not just a thing that you create. So we are acknowledging the fact today that the work is hard. The fact that what we're all facing right now, in addition to this hard work, is something called VUCA change. Now, Janae, you've heard me talk about this before, right?
All the time.
So I'm just saying VUCA has been used for years and years by the military. And now with the amount and the rapid fire change that we're facing, VUCA, which stands for volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous change. Just think about that for a second. The volatility, we don't know what the market is going to look like. We don't know how things are going to pick up or slow down, right? It's uncertain. Can we go out with the mask on? Is it safe? Do I get my vaccination, right? Is my job going to be here tomorrow? Right? Complex. I already mentioned that the fact that where we are today involves people. That in itself is a complexity. It's not something that you could just push a button and fix, right? And then there's this level of ambiguity. So we're acknowledging the fact that change is hard, which is why you don't have to do it by yourself.
Correct. I love that. And so we're talking about all the hard things that are a part of this, which is the reason why we're here. So we are really here to be of service and to make sure that, one, you have something at least to think about. Like obviously in an hour. We can't solve all your problems in an hour, right? But if there are things that we can do to plant a seed, that's what we're here for today. And for us, this is not just about a session or about being able to present our thought leadership or expertise. Like, this is about a movement that is bigger than us.
Yeah.
And so we never know who's going to be in the room. We don't know who's joining us on LinkedIn. We don't know who's actually on Zoom with us. And so hopefully there is even just one person, two people, five people who will take something from what we're saying and saying, yes, I acknowledge that it's hard, but I'm committed to the work. And now I have some ideas around what we actually can do, and using data as the driver for those results. So we are going to talk about the Power BI piece and like get into an actual example, but because you all came to talk about data in general, we're going to start with some data, talking about why we're here as well. So Landi, can you tell us more about what the data shows that people are seeing on the slide right now?
Okay, so what the data shows. So let me just look at this slide, like the reality of the past 10 years. So this is a report. I love Brookings. They provide valuable data and feedback that we can use for a visualization or just use for a session like this. The reality is we know that the United States population is changing. Now, hey, France and Germany, I know you're here. I'm just using a snippet, right? One of the things that I talk about when we're looking at data, because we can Google anything, right? But it's very important to look at your own local, your very specific industry and understand what's going on there with you. So I'm using the United States as an example to say that look at how the population has changed within the last 10 years. We're still waiting on the final results from the 2020 census. But the Latin population, our Latino, hola, si hay personas aquí que hablan español, hola, ¿cómo estás? The Latin population has increased. A part of the reason why I said, you know what, I want to learn to speak Spanish is because I wanted to learn to speak to more people. I didn't know a couple of decades later I would be using it like this. The Asian American population, look at these increases, right? So we're talking in the millions over the past 10 years. The Black population has increased. 3 million people just in the last 10 years. And then we have our additional, our other, which is often listed on different checks and applications. Other races are where there are 2 races combined has even increased. And my next slide, I can't wait to get to that, is going to talk about what this looks like in the workplace. What I will say at the bottom of that slide said that the population of our majority, which is where the United States was in terms of a majority population, is actually decreasing. Our white population is actually decreased within the last 10 years. So this is the one I get excited about. So you all know, if you've ever heard me before or now you're learning now, I speak English, I speak Spanish, but I also speak Millennial. And what that means, Janae, is there is this huge population. So you can even see from this graph, those who are 40 or younger. Okay, so you may have one at your home, or you may have, you may have raised a millennial or a Gen Z, but those folks who are 40 years old and younger represent over half of our population. And remember, this is waiting on data from the census from 2020. So this number continues to increase. And I can tell you that by 2025, millennials will represent about 76% of our workforce. Why is that important? Because that new majority in the workforce will 100% be diverse. Think about that. So when we look at the population that's changing and how it has been changing, we broke it out into the different groups. Latino, we talked about Blacks, we talked about Asian Americans, but the population shift is the millennial population represents the most diverse population ever in history.
Yes.
I'll let you take that there. Yeah, that's a real thing.
Just so you know, Blessing says millennials are here on the call. So they are responding to the call. Like, we are here, we are in the building. The other thing is, if you all have not read this article that has gone viral in the last week about geriatric millennials.
Oh my goodness.
That's me. So anybody born between 80 and 85, Like, because we used to be Gen Y and then we weren't anymore. And then we were just kind of lost, just kind of floating out there. And so we represent that big portion of the workforce that Landi's talking about. And the beauty of these geriatric millennials, I don't know how I feel about being called geriatric. I don't know how I feel about that part.
Hey, no age discrimination, none of
I
that.
don't know. I'm not sure. I might have to
I
come with another
represent my
word.
X's and boomers as well. We have conversations about
That's true. That's true. But I think what's beautiful about it and what the article talks about is that these are the people who can translate to every generation. So to the baby boomers and the Gen Xers, like we remember what it was to have a phone with a cord on it and dial-up internet, right? Like we remember AOL, we remember how you couldn't be on the phone and the computer at the same time, but we also have all the smart devices. We also use emojis. We also use apps. We also build apps. So we're kind of in that middle. And so I saw that article. I was like, wow, there is so much value as to what we're going to bring to the workforce, what we are already bringing to the workforce.
Yes.
But this is going back to our point. This is the reason why doing something about the DEI data dilemma is so important, because if you don't, then your sustainability is at risk as an organization, whether you have 5 employees or 55,000 employees.
That's right.
Your sustainability is at risk because you can see what's going to happen in the next 10 years, 15 years, what's already happening with the changing workforce.
So Janae, let me just, before we go too far off, I just want to raise a point that you just brought up that was so critical and valuable. So when we talk about DEI, we kind of throw this term around, right? I want to make sure that we understand that when we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, the aspect that we're delving deeper than that we just touched upon today is diversity. We spoke about race and gender, right? And there are these other elements that you touched on that says, hey, I have a diversity of perspective as well. Why? Because I understand what it's like to have a phone with a cord or a phone without a smartphone, right? I have a diversity of experience, maybe because I don't stay in my job for 20 years, because I may move around, right? Because I'll create a startup or I work in a corporation and then I'm willing to make that shift and move out. So understanding some of these differences, right? Understanding diversity and diversity of perspective is not a one path, one way approach. That's the reason why we're focusing on looking at the data to make the decisions, the data to have the conversations. And then in process, this data applies to people. So what do I need to do, right? And what if I don't do anything? Janae, tell us a little bit about what if you don't change, right? What does it cost you not to?
So really quickly, because we're broadcasting on LinkedIn too, I think this is Rashida. Hey, Rashida. Said in the chat, her 7-year-old saw a pager on the show and she was so amazed. It reminded her that she's a Gen Xer, right? Wow. So I just thought that was funny because our kids are also like, wait, you had to burn a CD. Like, what's that? Like, what do you mean burn it? Like, you lit it on fire? Like, what is that?
Oh, that is so
like,
funny.
What does that mean? I mean, my kids are kind of like, I don't get, like, they can't process. Like, wait, you couldn't make a phone call and Google at the same time. I was like, there was no Google. It was
so funny.
AOL. It was CompuServe. It was all these other things.
Those things that were important, right? We a whole nother time, another era.
Yes. So let's dig into what if you don't change. So let's say you see all this data and you're like, nah, I mean, we're just going to continue to be the way we are. And I noticed that at least on the Zoom side, we have several HR professionals that are joining us, right? So what we're going to show you next, it will resonate, right? But also for our business leaders, and mind you, the data that we're going to show you next actually applies even if you are a startup and you have 5 people on your team, 2 people on your team, it still applies. So what we have here, let's talk about the cost of attrition. So Landi, dig in a little bit to this calculator and talk about what is actually costing companies. So we have, some numbers that we've just plugged into the calculator, obviously maybe for a bigger, large enterprise, but talk to us a little bit about what this means and what people are seeing.
Sure. And so let me let me almost simplify this as well, because I was looking in the chat, and Janae, I did not know this. So I lived in Europe for a period of time, in Spain, to learn and speak Spanish. That was years ago. I saw in the chat that the data collection and the information that we're providing today is actually resonating with our partners in Europe, because they're not allowed to collect data this way.
Right.
So these calculators, these methods, this methodology, that's the reason why we are here to help. This calculator can be available to you, right? So you can figure out for yourself. It doesn't have to be something that we just talk about, or you have to bring in a data scientist to fix. You can create the approach right there in your business, with your team, with your corporation, starting somewhere. So let me jump in here. So employee retention, think about that talent. So we talked about, millennials, we talked about baby boomers, or just a tad bit in Gen Xers, understanding that millennials will represent the new majority and are very diverse. So when you think about attracting and who you are and who your workforce is, and why would people even want to work for you, how do you retain them? So we just took an average salary, let's say, of an annual salary for a tech employee, right? A tech leader level employee. And if you say that starts at about 220 a year, and this is according to statistics with the Society of Human Resource Management, SHRM. I was a part of that years ago. Love their data. Another place, another resource for you for data. So if you multiply that times our factor here of 250% to replace that employee is $500,000. Okay, let me say that again. To replace an employee who is one of your leaders, a technical leader, to replace. So, I remember the days of recruitment and working with recruiters and bringing it $500,000. Okay. Now let's say, again, you mentioned being a startup, Janae, maybe we have a smaller workforce or a smaller team, or we have lots of employees and we have entry-level positions. At the entry-level position, to replace that employee, $60,000 on average for the annual salary, times that factor of 50%, still cost you $30,000. Let me say that again for my startups, okay? $30,000 to replace an employee, someone who is trained, who is developed, who has knowledge, right? Who brings value, who brought their technical skills and expertise to your team. It costs you not to take this stuff very seriously.
So just so that I want to acknowledge that there's a question in chat that we will definitely get to, but I want to read it out loud, Landi, just so we don't forget.
Sure.
So the question is, in your work, are you finding people are more comfortable discussing gender versus ethnicity? And gender has become more an acceptable metric to discuss versus US ethnicity diversity metrics. So when we get into our segment on what we use for a client to measure and look at the Power BI dashboard, I think that's a really good place for us to answer that question. But excellent question. Thank you for asking that.
Thank you.
And I wanted to read it out loud just for those who are joining us on LinkedIn Live as well. So Landi talked about the cost of attrition. So this is when you lose employees because you haven't done that hard work that we talked about, done that hard work to make sure that your culture is inclusive and that you are working towards equity in your culture. Mm-hmm. But what happens when people stay? What happens when people stay and then they just check out? Because that's the cost of disengagement, right? So what happens is what we know and what the research shows. So this research, the previous calculator was research that was done by SHRM. This calculator is from Gallup. And so what they found is that corporations all over the world have people who are still in their jobs who are disengaged. Mm-hmm. And that just means that, you know what, maybe I had a lot of energy when I came in, when I got started, but I noticed some things, I experienced some things personally, I observed some things, and then I know that, you know what, this place is not really, they don't accept me for who I am. They don't really welcome me. They want me to morph into something else that I'm not. Or I am stressed out daily because I'm coming into a workplace where I don't know what day is going to be that day that someone's going to try me. I don't know. Is it today or is it in 2 weeks? It could be any day. And so I remember when I was on the corporate side, and I shared this story on LinkedIn, there was one particular company I worked for, And I used to listen to West Coast gangster rap on my way to work
No, you,
just to
Janae.
get ready. Yes, Landy, I had to because I didn't know. Like
Yeah.
so I would have to like go in. It was like it was like battle music, and then I get to my desk and I listen to a little bit of classical and maybe some gospel just to calm myself down. But because I did not know, because there were always comments and there were always battles that I had to fight that were unnecessary. And so at some point I became that disengaged employee.
Mhm.
So if you look at this calculator, look at what we've highlighted on the right side of your screen. There's 17.2% of the US population, their workforce is disengaged. So let's say you had this is a very large company. So this case study was done on a very large company. But in this calculator, we can change this number, right? So 54,000 people is the head count, but let's say their head count was 2,000. Let's say their head count was 200. You can still do the same calculation, look at the number of disengaged employees, take an estimate of what their median salary is, and this is what it's costing you annually. So even if you just have one disengaged employee, it's still costing you over $27,000 a year because they are disengaged. It's costing you that in productivity. It has been shown that disengaged employees take more sick days. So sometimes your health insurance cost goes up. And then, mind you, you're not maybe you're not hitting targets in terms of when projects are going to be done because your employees are disengaged. So hopefully we've laid out to you the reason why, given a data-driven approach, because of course we are here to show you the data. A lot of times we talk about diversity, equity, inclusion as the right thing to do. So I think we got that part, right? But this
Yeah.
is why it is an urgent imperative. And the calculators that we're showing you are just something for you to start thinking about. And more importantly, for you to take back to your leadership to say, hey, we got to do something about this. Like we can't just do the lip service because there's risk here. This is showing you what the risk exposure is for your organization, no matter how big or small. So before we move on to our next poll question, Landy, did you have anything to add here?
Yeah, I did. So, I thank you for giving us the real, right? For speaking about what it took for you to go to work. So when I use that term volatile, the environment that we're facing, that's a real thing. For you to feel like you had to go to battle just to go to work. Now, imagine adding a pandemic on top of that, right? So when we look at this, when this poll was taken, when Gallup estimated these studies, this was pre-COVID, right? So the cost of disengagement, I remember doing a similar case or a case study with a client that I was working with regarding their productivity, as the productivity. So often we look at from the outside, like, okay, let's adjust, let's put some more tech in there, or let's add a new system in there. And that is the key. That's what I'm speaking to when I say this is complex, because it involves people. When people are disengaged, the people that you are hiring to do the work, or if it is you, if you're the leader and you're not taking time to breathe,
right,
it costs you everything. So that's the data that we're speaking to and saying, okay, now what do we do different? How do we figure it out? Janae, I feel like you're going to provide some solutions.
Yeah, we have a little bit, but first, before we get into the solutions, we are going to ask one more question. So get ready to take advantage of the poll question that's coming up. But before that, there was one question in chat that said, "Where is the calculator?" So if you register through Zoom, you will get a follow-up email, and we'll send you the link to the calculator there. For those of you who are joining us on LinkedIn Live, the link to register on Zoom is in the LinkedIn event. And of course, if you still can't find it, reach out to either Landy or I. We will be sure to send it to you. But that's how we're keeping track of our email list versus just trying to grab emails from in the chat. So if you would please make sure you register, and we will definitely share the link to the calculator, and you can get in there and kind of play around with it and figure out, what it is that it looks like for your company.
Yes, that
All right.
localized data.
Yes. So here is the next poll question. And for those of you who are joining us on LinkedIn Live, you can participate in this too. And then for those of you who are joining us on Zoom, same. So again, if you didn't join the poll already, the instructions are at the top. But if you did join the poll, you should be able to just respond either via text message or via your browser. So how do you currently collect data? So someone said HRIS. Could you break down what that acronym means? Because I think I know what it means. So I think it's HR information systems, but I want to make sure that that's what you all call it at your company. So some of the things that we've seen as you're responding to this, and I want you to make sure, yes, it was okay, human resource information systems. And so as you're responding, even if you are not working for a large corporation, and maybe you're not even collecting data around people, you still collect data in some way, right? So
Right.
let's say you are a tech startup. How are you currently collecting data to make decisions about what products to take to market? How are you collecting data about who to hire and what to pay them and what kind of resources that you have? So I want you to think about, so I see human resource info systems using SurveyMonkey, US Census. So let's think about some of the other ways that you're currently collecting data. And it also could be, these things that are on the screen are more so about quantitative data, but think about qualitative. Think
Right.
about how you're gathering information through conversations, through stakeholder interviews, through focus groups, through informal focus groups. Like just, one of the things that we lost with COVID was sort of the water cooler talk in the office. And so that is a way of gathering data. Sometimes that just tells you where to look. Someone said Power BI is gathering their data. Okay, wonderful. I love it. Somebody's already using Power BI. Power Apps, absolutely. So if
Mhm.
you have an organization that already uses Power Apps and Power BI, like you can use, and a lot of times we see that for, let's say, the technology side of the organization, but you can use this for DEI as well. So because Power Apps speak to Power BI and it's all integrated within, all your other Microsoft products, there's some very simple ways, if you already have these tools at work, that you can start using this for this particular purpose that we're talking about. Okay, so I see some of the responses still coming in.
We got focus groups in there. So we're
Yep.
talking to our people, talking to our employees, as you said, qualitative and quantitative. So think about both of those. I love Facebook for workplace polls, having conversations. So the
Yes.
great thing about this poll is that we're able to see that it's across the board, right? We're able to see that we don't look at all data the same way, and we're not collecting it all the same way. And that's kind of what we wanted to show you. We wanted to give you an opportunity to see that whether you're intentionally and being strategic, Google Forms, I love it, being strategic about the way that you're collecting data, or whether it's more informal and kind of happening. One of the questions that was in the chat said, how do we re-engage our minorities in the workplace? How do we get people involved? Part of it is utilizing data, right? So if you're not being intentional in collecting your data and looking at it and analyzing it and breaking it down and say, okay, what do we need to do different? Remember, I talked about tech before and said we use technology often to solve problems. We use data to solve problems as well. We just have to be intentional in how we collect, look, analyze, visualize, and tell the story about who data is speaking about.
I love it. And just to note, there were, I guess, what to add on to that question, that came from chat about how do you use data to re-engage minority employees. So what we're going to show you in the Power BI dashboard example is not just about, kind of tracking progress, right? But it also is leadership's way to say, we heard you and we know that there's a problem and we acknowledge that there's some work that we need to do. And so here's where we are with that work. It's not perfect, it's not done yet, but it shows that there's some commitment, right? So even if your leadership is willing to even take that extra step
Mhm.
and to be transparent about what's happening, because a lot of times, even within your organization, you could have a task force or a committee that's kind of working on things, if you will. And maybe they have been working really hard for the last year, but there is very limited visibility across the organization.
Right.
And so, how we use data to really engage, particularly your minority workforce, is to say, like, listen, we understand that this is a problem. We haven't forgotten about it. It wasn't just the flavor of the month, it wasn't just what was dominating the news cycle. We remember what our commitments were, and here's where we are with it. And so, it helps to build confidence among the leadership, and really among the workforce. Landi, you were going to add something.
just to say, and I know we're circling from the poll, but you said your minority workforce, and I just wanted to remind us all that that minority workforce is the new majority, right?
Yes.
So think about your team and how you're approaching this. That minority workforce is the new majority, so it has to be addressed.
I love the people who are still answering our poll question. And also there are a couple of comments that came in from LinkedIn Live. Michael says, I quit my job and went back to school once I became disengaged. There didn't seem to be a path for my success. So thank you for adding that, Michael, because I think it's helpful when we hear like real people with real stories talking about, hey, I was disengaged and this is what happened to me. So thank you for that. Also, Fred says, if business execs don't address these issues, they're leaking profits and may not be aware of it. Love it. It is so absolutely true. Yes.
It is why we're here. It is why we're here. So, okay, absolutely. We're tracking. I'm looking at time, Janae.
I'm looking at time too. No, we're going. We're going.
You all see, we haven't been around the water cooler. You know, we missed this.
I know. I know.
You know, this is a heavy subject, but we're trying to make sure that you see our commitment to something that's very heavy by the passion that we get to have a conversation. We get to work on this with you. We get to engage with you. So again, thank you for your participation. Please keep the chat and comments coming.
Yes, so I love all the engagement that we have on Zoom as well as on LinkedIn. And thank you to our team for kind of pulling in the LinkedIn comments so that we can see what's happening on LinkedIn at the same time. So we're going to get into this data dilemma and first kind of lay some foundation around that. And so first of all, there are a couple of, remember, we came to tell you the truth about what we know and what we've seen in companies. So number one, the right data model creates a solid foundation for scaling and sustainability.
Wait. Did you say scaling and sustainability? Data?
Say both. Yes, scaling and sustainability.
How so?
I'll tell you more about that, Landi, and we'll also show an example. So what you see kind of listed on this screen are some of the reasons why. So this is sort of the case for this, right? So first of all, there's an internal business case. And so we can talk about equity and inclusion and representation and belonging all as these very feel-good topics. But what we know is that the vast majority, even if they are nonprofits, they're still in business to make money, right? They still have to look at the impact and the bottom line. And to be honest, we need these companies to be viable, right? So we need these companies to be viable because if they have committed leaders, they can actually have so much reach and impact in the world, right? So this is not to say that, oh, we don't need to talk about the business case. I'm of the mind that we absolutely do need to talk about the business case, and we can actually make more progress that way by calling that out. I talked a little bit about accountability for the commitment. So I gave you an example previously. So I think that part is clear. If I look at a dashboard and you said, company A, that you were going to increase your representation of women, let's throw that out there, by 20% in the next 2 years at the executive level, then I should be able to go to the dashboard and see, okay, well, we're 1 year in, are we at least at 10%? Oh, we're at 12%, great. Oh, we're at 7%. Well, what's the plan to like close that gap, right? That's what the data and the dashboards will do. The other thing is that there's this transparency piece, right? So a lot of times there are decisions that are being made behind closed doors. There also are commitments that are very public, very loud. They might have a little bit of marketing behind them because it looks good for the company, even if it's not happening externally. Even if it's happening internally, hey, we're going to tell our employees we're going to do all this and we're very committed, we're going to do this. But then if there's no transparency or visibility, at some point, somebody's going to raise their hand and be like, wait a minute, didn't you say, well, what's happening with that? And oh, they weren't serious. Mm-hmm. So then we go back to the disengagement, right?
Right.
The other piece is a lot of times these efforts are led by one committed leader or a body of
like a sponsor, right?
Yes, there's an executive sponsor. There's someone who has the influence in the organization. But what happens when they leave? What happens when they change jobs? What happens when they retire? So the data outlasts them. And then using these visualizations with periodic updates, it builds confidence in the workforce. So the workforce can see, oh, okay, well, I see, they did a baseline in this quarter in Q1. And then if I go compare that to Q3, I can see where there's actually been some progress. And so what we know is what gets measured gets done. Landi, did you want to add anything here?
You said it so well. I'll do just two quick things. We acknowledge the need for the leadership, for the sponsor. We acknowledge the need for the beginning, for the start. The reality is for change to happen. Remember, we started off by saying this work is hard. For culture change to happen, for things to shift, for things to really make a difference and an impact, it can't be just one person's job. Right. And so what you said about data is that it outlasts the leadership, the one person, the executive sponsor, the marketing campaign that looks good. And that's where we're diving in. We're saying that these visualizations make it easy for everyone to be a part of the commitment, the connection, the values, the embracing what gets measured, gets done.
Absolutely. So, we talk about this, right? And so a lot of people, I even see it in chat, like they're on board. They're like, yes, we agree. We get it. We see it. We love it. Absolutely. But then it's always this question. All right, but how? Like, how exactly? So, it's easy for us, Landi, to sit where we are and say, we run consultancies, but our business is based around this work. So we take deep dives in this work all the time. Yeah. We're always thinking about solutions for clients as it relates to data. But that's easy for us to say from where we're sitting. We want to actually show you how you can actually do something that is not necessarily super heavy, and it's not impossible, and you don't have to have a team of experts necessarily to do it. Now, for some of the things that we're showing in terms of what we do for clients, obviously, you want to consult and you want to make sure that you have some support on that. But there are also some places that you can start. So our goal today, again, as I mentioned, is to plant a seed for you to start thinking about, oh, wait a minute, maybe that's possible in our organization. So let me give you an example. For those of you who registered on Zoom, you didn't know it, but you were a part of our data experiment. You were a part of our data exercise. You didn't know it though. You thought like, oh, I'm just registering on Zoom. I'm just kind of putting in some answers to questions. But if you remember, we had specific questions in the registration, and this is what it looks like. This is just a snapshot, right? So this is just a snapshot based on the responses. And we do this every time we show up for any kind of virtual engagement for sure, but even in person, right? So think about all the times that you are having these touch points with your employees, particularly for those of you who are working in corporate, where you have them coming to a town hall or an all hands meeting, or you're having them come to a working session, or there's some kind of quarterly update from your executive. Are you taking that opportunity to actually ask them anything? Like this, what you see on the screen, this is 2 questions, right? So we asked you about the current state, and then we asked you about how progress is being measured. That's it. Like that's all we asked you. But think about how much this one snapshot, and this is very simple, how if we did this inside of a company, how we could take that back to the leadership and say, hey, this is where we can start measuring. And also, here's where you need to dig deeper. Here's some areas that we need to look at. And mind you, you don't want to ask our questions necessarily unless it's relevant, but think of what are your 2 questions. So again, I know it sounds very simple, like Janae, okay, you're telling me to come up with 2 questions. I thought I had to have a 20-question survey. I thought I had to have 50 focus groups. And the thing is, maybe when you start scaling, you do, but you can start with 2 questions and actually get some intelligence that will be helpful to your leadership. Okay, so we got like,
look, you see me nodding like, yes.
I know, we got like 10 minutes left and we're gonna get to the Power BI stuff, go.
But here's the thing, Janae, here's the reality. And I'm seeing it in the chat. Hi, Joanne. This is real. This is real time, real examples. Think about it. You registered for a Zoom. This is real data, right? So it is measuring what matters. What we look at, what we measure is where we can make progress. So we're giving you insights to help you look at your data, no matter what it is, because this is related to people, diversity, equity, and inclusion. We're speaking to, okay, let's start to peel back the onion on these tough issues, these problems that we can't seem to capture because they're related to people. Start somewhere. This is definitely a start. Oh, there's more.
Absolutely. Okay, so really quickly, I think there was Joanne said, excellent real life, real time example of using data in the DEI journey. Love it. There was also a message that came in from LinkedIn Live. I want to just read this really quickly because I think it raises a good point. I like your points on how data outlasts leadership and org changes and how data can build confidence in the workplace. However, there is a challenge in building trust that the data is accurate / real. And that came from Shauna. Hey, Shauna. That came from Shauna from LinkedIn Live. So yes, absolutely. And I think, that's for another session, right? Because we only got a few minutes left.
Yes.
But I think it's absolutely important for us to acknowledge that, especially if you're in an organization where there's already a lack of trust in the culture, right? So if I already don't trust that my leadership is putting out what the reality is, what the absolute truth is, and that it's a lot of rhetoric and corporate speak, or they've kind of baked over the numbers to make themselves look good, then I'm already a little bit skeptical when I see these different data models. So yes, Shauna, thank you for that. That was an excellent point. All right. So for what you came for, and mind you, Landi, I told you this before we started. Funny enough, y'all, I have a Peloton delivery today. Don't ask me why. It took Peloton like 18 weeks, 24 weeks, 52 weeks. I don't know how long to deliver my bike. Now, how I'm going to get on it and being very pregnant, we'll see. But my bike is supposed to be here, and I think they just called me. So if they call back, I might have to jump off for a second.
No, I got it.
Landi, you got it. But
listen, there's accountability, and we're being transparent.
So being transparent, but also this is a tech support issue because I tried to get them to move the delivery. Anyway, long story, I won't get into it. But for those of you who are in tech,
we know, we got you.
Yeah, okay. So you all understand what's going on here. All right. So this is actually a snapshot. And like I mentioned, we have a BI architect that's a part of our team. And so what you're seeing is a real client example, right? So you're seeing this from a team that has a global presence, global reach. And this is actually a snapshot of their Power BI dashboard. So some of the things you're going to see here on the top, there's a gauge that actually shows what their KPIs are, because we really lean on them to, hey, we're not just going to just put colorful things on a slide. We're not just going to put colorful things in a dashboard. Like, let's actually establish what the KPI is, just like we do for any other business process. Yep. And then down at the bottom, you'll notice that this is actually one of the live survey questions from a survey that we designed for them, right? And so as the survey results come in, what they want to be able to see is, okay, well, where are we? And then how does that split by gender? And then also, where are we going to be when this is the baseline, but when we look at this same model in comparison 6 months from now, what has changed? How have our percentages changed? And then also it kind of tells a bit the leadership where to dig, where to kind of investigate a little bit more. So these questions around, or the answers around completely disagree, it really gives you some intel, like, okay, well, maybe we need to look in that further. And then that's where you start having more conversations. That's where you start gathering your qualitative data. That's where you start looking at, okay, do we need to do a focus group around this? Do we need to kind of maybe do some follow-up engagements to figure out, okay, let's get to the root of the problem. Then over on the right, we have it broken down by location. And so, for those of you who work for global entities, and I know we have some people joining us from all over the world, which is just amazing. We know that there are challenges that are very unique to specific countries, right? And so from a global leadership perspective, this gives them some intel to say, okay, the things that we need to work on in the US may not be the same as Canada. There's not a one size fits all. So that's what the data shows. And that's what this particular dashboard is helping the leadership to do. But this is also about transparency. This is also about, hey, we're showing you where we are and where our results are. We're showing you where our target is. We're showing you that we're not there yet. Like, we know we're not there yet, but we're also showing you we are committed to track this to make sure that you can see that we're making progress around this.
Oh, that's good. If I can just add really quickly,
Yes.
that question, and you said this, we're going to address the question that was in the chat that involved engagement. How do we re-engage? Here it is. Here are examples. Here are ways to look at the data to, parcel out, okay, wow, we see where the problem is. These are how we make data-driven decisions.
Yes.
This is how we decide what to focus on. Remember that whole thing about, what we measure matters. Like, you have to start somewhere, but once you start to look at this data, it's like, okay, what do we do next? Trust was an issue before that we talked about. How are we asking questions related to how people feel about trust? Here it says, a question about being mistreated. Is that not important? And does that not affect the possibility of feeling disengaged or even leaving the corporation? This is where we're diving deep into the data.
Yes. Okay. So last example, and again,
Yes.
this is a Power BI example. And so this is a little loop video to show you how we filter using the data. So basically, it's not just about the static data of what you can see, but this is showing you how you can create your Power BI dashboard. And for those of you who have used Power BI before, this is the basic functionality. Like there's nothing that, even though we have an expert on our team who builds this out for our clients and ensures that what their business requirements are, that we're meeting that, and also it's compatible with their internal platforms. We do that part, but this is not, if you have Power BI, this is not like an advanced function of it. But for those of you who are not familiar with it, or no matter what you're using, if you're using Tableau, I saw some people saying they gather data through Workday. And so, and there are all these other kind of dashboards that you can create, right? But what this shows is that this is where your company, your leader, or even you as an individual contributor can start looking at what is the correlation. So what you're seeing on the screen is the filtering by correlation. So up at the top, there are specific actions that they have committed to. So for instance, they wanted to measure how people feel like they belong in the organization. And that's what the question is about at the very bottom of the screen. So that is the results of the question are at the bottom. At the top, the task force decided, okay, we're going to create a buddy system within our organization to really help foster that sense of belonging. And so if we have people who said they disagree, so for instance, if you have a high number of people, a high number of female employees who disagree with the fact that they feel like they belong and saying, yeah, I don't feel like I belong. Then we click on that and we look at, okay, well, out of the people who said they don't feel like they belong, how many of them have actually enrolled in this buddy system?
Right.
And then that's where you start asking questions. And that's also where, Landi, to your point, you can start making decisions. What do we need to do differently? Who else do we need to engage? How do we fix this problem? How do we identify maybe some root causes to? Anything else here before I move on from this?
No, I want to move on because I want to get that last piece of data from our audience. I hope this was helpful. Please, let's get that last poll in there and let's give our contact information for us to connect. This last poll question, we want you to participate in because we want to know from you. We are committed to walking away, to making sure that you walk away with actionable items, practical tools, tips, and techniques that you can apply in your business, in your workplace, with your team as a leader. So the question to you is, what one action can you commit to in the next 90 days? Okay, 90 days might feel like 5 years today, but today we're asking, what is the one action that you can commit to in the next 90 days based on what you heard today? Can you all please text, if you've already participated in the poll, you're just texting into 22333 and answering the question there. What is the one action you can commit to in the next 90 days based on what you heard today? You could also respond through the poll everywhere.com, JJ Johnson 128. And we want to make sure as we wrap up with this final few seconds that you have our contact information as well.
Wonderful. So Landi, thank you so much for that, for teeing up the poll question. And before we go on to our conclusion, and I see some people actually responding in chat. So if you're like, hey, I don't have time to do the poll, I want to just get something in real quick. Absolutely. So I love that someone has already responded. There are a couple people who are responding in chat. My LinkedIn Live people, I'm sure you all are responding. We'll go back and look at the comments. But we want to make sure that we have given you enough ideas today for you to start implementing. So our point was not to show you, hey, here are the steps to build a Power BI dashboard, right? But it was about, here are some ideas of what actions that you can take, and continue to respond to the poll, because we do want to make sure that we're wrapping up. We're already about a minute over time, and my Peloton team just texted me and they said they're on their way. So I gotta roll.
We don't want you to miss that.
I know. So I want to go to the very last slide and just to say thank you. And this is how you get in contact with us. So again, we are on LinkedIn. Both Landi and I are very active on LinkedIn. Yes. She and I also, our companies collaborate wherever we have opportunities to do so. Yes. And so that's why in this particular topic and doing this particular part of the work, we really wanted to come together on this. Also in chat, XO, if you could put the links to both of our websites. So there are ways to contact us. You can send an email. I mean, there's all kinds of ways. Like, you have no excuse. If you need help, reach out. Like, even just to ask a question, right? For those of you who register via Zoom, we will be sending out the follow-up email on tomorrow that will include the cost calculator. And if you have other questions, just respond to that email. We're happy to help. But if there's anything else that we can do to support you in this, we want to thank the organizers of the Houston Tech Rodeo. I want to thank Landi for roping me into this, because I was like, what?
I love it, roping me in.
Yeah, so the rodeo, you caught that, right? Landi, any closing thoughts before we finish?
So, I'm loving that in the chat. I'm seeing that this was helpful. It was insightful. And even Melanie said this was funny. During the time that we are facing this reality of, these changes, these complexities, the work again is hard, and you don't have to do it alone. We stand here virtually connected, right? We're connected remotely. We're asking that you reach out. It might not be today, it might be tomorrow, or maybe within the next 90 days that you choose to do something different. But the key is that you start somewhere. And what we're reminding you of is, and I say this all the time, emotions are data. Emotions are data. Think about that. You feel something, it tells you what's going on with you as a human. If I have, butterflies in my stomach before I jumped on today, it's telling me, oh, I might be a bit afraid. So I pay attention to that and I breathe, right? I choose to do something different. So data matters. Making decisions based on data is not something that you need to do alone. We are hoping that this connection between data, innovation, technology, and diversity, equity, and inclusion was helpful to you. Janae, I am 100% honored to have stood alongside you today. Thank you for your insight, your expertise. Wow, I'm blown away at the possibilities. So I'm asking you all, don't be a stranger. Please keep in touch. There is more to come from this collaboration.
Absolutely. So we're seeing a lot of thank yous and a lot of gratitude in the chat. Again, thank you so much. Thank you to my team at CTM Unlimited for hosting the Zoom, and thank you to EXO for making sure that everything was still running in the background.
Oh my gosh, yes, EXO, thank you.
Yes. So,
and look, you've been mentioning the transparency that got me all excited. The shift, when you look at the shift, it stands for something, and the T is for transparency. So we have been very transparent. We're going to let Janae jump off and go get her Peloton bike here today. Thank you to my team in EXO. We appreciate you jumping on. For all who have attended, thank you for the work that you're doing and choosing to show up big. Please be in touch.
Thanks, everyone. Oh, and the recording will be available too. Sorry, meant to mention that. You will get that. If you sign up via Zoom, you will get a copy of the recording. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thanks, Janae.
Thank you.